Would you go to a party wearing Crocs? Why not? Because they're ugly.
Yeah.
They're crazy comfortable. Like I would wear them all day long wherever I go to. But the reality is that I will stop using them if they're ugly. And it has to do more, as I already told you, not with the principle of usability, but more with the principle of feasibility. I want this to be desirable. I want to have something new, something nice. And I think that gaining customer loyalty has to do with that.
So I'm going to start with the first question. How do you approach designing user experience with customer retention in mind?
I think one goes with the other. We cannot talk about customer retention without customer experience, right? And customer experience is directly tied to UX. If you have something that's a very common thing. Let's go to the most basic and common sense thing. If a customer reaches an experience that it's tiring, that it's not worthy, that it gives whatever, then they're gonna abandon. If you take care of this customer experience via UX, via what you made, and you really keep your users in mind and their feelings and their needs, you're going to immediately make something that's gonna catch their attention. Something else that it's important is knowing when to avoid unnecessary steps, to know how you're going to fix whatever you're doing so that it becomes easier for everyone. It becomes, friendlier for everyone. And in that way, they're going to be enticed to at least using the service. Notice that using doesn't mean retention. So it can come to a point where you have a very high bounce rate and you need to know where that bounce rate is. So in my belief, you cannot fix customer retention without fixing the service first. And that's something that has to do with strategy. You need to know how the business is being made, why it's happening that way, how are they going to use it, what do they actually want. And then you need to make a lot of modifications over the service. I think that a very big common mistake for people is thinking that their service is finished when services are actually never finished. They have to be updating, they have to bring some new stuff, they have to go at the same time as trends. We have to change things that come more from the service and the strategy, and then help the user understand the user experience, whatever they're thinking or whatever they're feeling. So I believe that I'm a very strong believer that fixing and iterating a service based on what the customer needs more than once, it's going to help you not only retain your customers, but improve your service and your company.
Basically answer like all of my questions, but but I get it. It's very important. It's supposed to go together, but it's so, for me, I'm using so many apps. I realize that even if it's that obvious, you can find it that nobody's doing it really well. Like you go to an app and you don't know what to do and how should I pay and where is, you get lost and you lost the retention. So something so simple, it feels like it's difficult to accomplish.
It is, because it's usually simplifying, not overdoing. I'm going to give you an example with that. Before, I know that you live in Mexico, you were at a party, you wanted to get someone to drive you home, and you had to call a cab. That cab would take around 15 minutes to get to the party. And before that, you wouldn't mind. You would be like, oh, wait the 15 minutes. And you would sit down and talk to your friends. Now, if you get an Uber that takes 10 minutes, you're going to immediately call it up and ask for another Uber, because you say like, wow, it's a very long time. But it doesn't have to do with the time that it actually takes, but more with the expectancies of the person who is asking for the Uber. So you have to think that people change, and they change based on what happens around them. And it changes based on their environment. And you need to also change and move that in whatever digital product you're designing. So you need to keep on adapting to their needs. And sometimes they're expecting something that it's not currently viable, as simple as that. I think the payment example, it's a very good example, because you need to depend on a third-party platform. And that third-party platform will depend on the bank of the credit card that you're actually paying with, right? It's very different paying with PayPal than paying with, I don't know, BBVA. But at the same time, what you can do is reduce every unnecessary step that the user has to take. So sometimes I think that's the hard part. More than adding, it's knowing what you should be taking away. And that's a very tough job because usually you have to, when things take a lot of time, people get attached to them. And then it's very hard to convince your stakeholders and telling them, like, I know that this took you a year to build, but hey, listen, you're losing all of your clients here. So why don't we bring it down a notch? And they will say, no, it took me a year. Yeah, but it's actually costing you, that amount. So I think that's a hard part. That's our job, basically, trying to understand at which points or interactions we can simplify something so that people can actually use it. It also goes hand in hand with onboarding. As I already mentioned, it has to do more with the surroundings than the actual, right, problem or service itself. So you also have to think of onboarding, how I'm going to teach people to build this. You have to think about the journey that they're taking end to end from the service, the stakeholders within the service, as I already mentioned, the platform, the everything. So it's kind of like a mix of things that you have to put together to be able to simplify something that sounds very complicated when it actually isn't, right?
Right. And do you have another specific example where user experience directly contribute to improve customer retention metrics?
I have a lot of them. I think one of my favorites is Headspace. And the reason why I'm choosing Headspace is because it is a platform that constantly iterates depending on what's happening around them. So Headspace started as a meditation platform that would help you become more conscious of yourself, bring mindfulness into your life. And it used to be kind of like a meditation journey where you would start with a minute meditation, then a 3 minute, then a 5 minute, then a 20 minute, until you were able to meditate for like 3 hours and a half. But they had a huge bounce rate because people were frustrated in the way that they were saying, okay, why do I have to meditate for 3 hours? That's not my goal. So people were actually abandoning the platform because it was too complicated to build. So they keep iterating their service, which is something that I love. I'm currently a Headspace user, and that's why I'm telling you the story, because I've used it since the beginning. So right now, if you see the platform, if you open the platform, they have a gazillion ways and opportunities depending on the person who is using it and their personality. So you can go either by time or by topic. During the pandemic, they had like pandemic specific meditation exercise. I think they even have Star Wars meditation exercises. So it's a way of being true to your service and knowing what you really want to accomplish and finding a way that actually interacts with customers in a way that you can keep them interested and engaged and keep building content all the time and keep swinging like from side to side on what your service should look like, what it should be like. And it serves a gazillion users in a gazillion different ways. And now they have a huge retention and they have a very low bounce rate. And that's the reason why they have a bounce rate. Something else about these sort of platforms that I didn't mention before is I believe that usage of paid services, such as, for example, Headspace, Spotify, even Netflix, has to do a little bit a lot on their business plan. So, for example, when you started Netflix, I don't know if that happened to you, but it did to me. When you started using Netflix, it was super cheap. It was crazy cheap. And all of your family would use Netflix. They would have one account that you would share with your mom, your cousin, your aunt, your son, it was a huge network. Now, when they included this family sharing, that now everyone, like you have up to one device, up to two devices, they lost a lot of customers because it's not what they actually need. Versus, let's call Spotify, that they have a family sharing feature. So it's easier. Why don't you pay like 100 pesos more per month and then your entire family can use Spotify? It's easier. It's cheaper. People can think of it clearly. So sometimes when platforms have to be paid, you need to see how the service is being delivered. So I would say always focus on the service, focus on what it provides, what is their mission, what is their statement, what is their business plan, and then think about a UX that will entice people and will help them keep using your product. But you always have to think about that.
You mentioned already like 4, but for example, can you share more key elements that a product or website need to have to user satisfaction and customer loyalty?
Okay, so I would say first of all would be ease of use of the service. Needs to be easy to use. Second, you need to have options, and you need to have several options for whoever is using it. I would say 3, you need to respond to customer needs. You need to be able to know what they want, how they want it, and why. That was 3. 4, it needs to be iterative, which means that it needs to be updating depending on what on people's wants and needs. And I will say the 5th one, I think the 5th one, and that's something that I strongly believe in, you have to help your users become loyal to your platform or to your service. And that goes tied up with a lot of other things. It has to be tied to brand. It has to be tied to your mission, to your vision, to brand loyalty. An example of that is before we didn't used to care about the environment. It was just like, I will get 5 bags, plastic bags. I don't care if a turtle eats it, because we didn't even know that that would exist. Now let's put it as an example, H&M. H&M is a brand with certain values, with certain things that I'm not a fan of H&M. I still believe that it's, has a lot of things with like purple washing and a gazillion things. But at the same time, one of their missions is to reduce carbon print. So the easiest way was, why don't you bring your clothes, the one that you're not using anymore? Let's recycle them. And if you buy anything in H&M, you're gonna see that they have 50% recycled, 100%. So it has to do more with brands and with companies actually standing up for what they believe in. And that's something else that I believe that with time has become more and more important to people. And as I already mentioned, has a lot to do with factors that are completely out of their mind. Another example is American Express, Amex. I don't know if you have Amex, but
I have Amex.
One who has Amex loves Amex, and the reason why we love it is because their customer support is amazing. It's crazy expensive. A lot of establishments don't take Amex, so you need to have like a backup credit card. But every time that you get scored anything with that card and you call customer service and they answer to you and tell you, hey, Mariel, good morning. How's your day going? You can even start crying and tell them like, I was charged, blah, 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 and they will solve the matter. I don't know how. They will connect you to a shrink if they want to, but that's their vision. It's saying, okay, we're going to provide you with superb and excellent customer support. So as long as they keep that promise, right, it's going to help people keep using their service.
Yes.
So I would say that's the 5th, that it's a lot of times it's forgotten, but I would say never forget, like let companies and brands know to never forget how they started and why they're actually here.
I love it. And the next question is related more to the process. So how do you gather and incorporate user feedback into the UX design process to enhance customer retention efforts?
Okay, so first off, you need to know where the problem is. That's one of the trickiest parts, because a lot of people assume that their problem is one thing without talking to people on what the problem really is. So first off, we need to talk to people and ask them, hey, what's going on? We need to have kind of these pre-analysis of what's happening? Like, why aren't you using this? Or would you fix it? How would you fix it? How would you make it better? After you have all of that feedback, which is a lot, you need to analyze and simplify, because you will see patterns that are in. So this feedback can come in many ways, can come with interviews, can come with usability testings, can come with data being provided by the same apps. We usually have bounce data where we say everyone is abandoning after the onboarding. Why is that? So you can know, okay, so this is the screen that you're seeing after the onboarding. Let's rewatch. Let's talk to people. Let's see what's going on. You need to, after that, find those patterns and know, okay, so pattern A is after onboarding, after blah, blah, blah. And you need to start looking on what people actually need. So what people actually need, because it's not about a tantrum. Like, I want it to be pink. They're saying it's taking me too long to do this. It's doing this or that. After you get all of that feedback analyzed, you have to map everything that's going on in each screen, on each screen. And then here comes the tough part, because you're going to need to simplify and iterate. So you need to adapt to that feedback. We obviously cannot do everything that people tell us, but we can find a middle ground between everything that's going on. As I already mentioned, for example, the Uber cab example, we're not solving how the drivers bring and if their car is theirs. And we're just solving a very easy concept that it's called immediacy, right? We need this service to be immediate. How are we going to do that? So it's basically the same thing. We need this to be easier. We need this to be faster. We need this to be simpler. We need this to be, so that's the way that you start incorporating all of the users' feedback. Now, a lot of people say, oh, now it's fixed. I'll just send it. And no, we have to retest, because we have to go back and ask people, is this what you meant? Oh, look, now it's much more easier to use. Oh, well, then problem solved. But they might say, hell no, this made it a whole more complicated. So we need to go back every single time. And I think this also has to do with the principle that I've already mentioned to you. Services are never finished. Never finished. So this is a process that needs to keep going on and on and on and on and on. You're going to keep
you solve
having
a problem and then you have another 5.
Exactly. Or it can be the same problem, but adapted.
Yeah.
It can be like, oh, look, now I've done this, but I learned from other 25 platforms that I can do this faster or easier or cheaper. Or so you need to be always adapting. Something else that is important also to understand is that a lot of people say apps look alike. And they don't look alike for a reason. They look alike because every time that you change everything from anything, you're going to go crazy. Right? I don't know if it has happened to you. And I like to place an example to my students. Have you ever cooked dinner in someone else's house?
It's horrible.
It's horrible,
Horrible.
right? The
You can't
worst
find
thing.
anything. Yeah.
Exactly. Imagine if you do that with every single product that you design next. It's going to be horrible. So these changes need to be done little by little. They need to look alike in a way, because if you've already learned how to use it, then it's easier to remember, oh, I changed the knives and they're over the counter now. They're not on the same place. It's easier to remember than I changed everything. So you need to also know, and this also has a part of a strategy plan. How am I going to introduce these changes in a way that the user will learn how to use them easily, slowly, and progressively, and not like
Going
bam.
crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I think it's difficult to find that middle ground, because
Yeah.
I imagine that you want to do something different and do something innovative, and you maybe go to that part when you are changing everything,
Mm-hmm.
but you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do something exactly the same like the competition. So
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult.
I always like to say, state the difference between innovation and disruption. Innovation goes little by little. It has to respond to something very important, which is your business. If there's no business, then it's very hard for you to have innovation as a whole, right? You need 3 categories for it to be actually innovative. If you change everything, then your business will crash. Easy as that. But if you do something disruptive, then you might be there. You might get a change. You might get a chance. But doing something disruptive is throwing everything that you did away. It's something entirely new. You cannot follow the same innovation path if you're doing something disruptive. So something disruptive, I would say, let's place an example. The new augmented reality Apple device.
That's
Let's go
everywhere.
a little bit backwards. The iPod.
Okay.
The iPod was something disruptive. The iPhone was something disruptive. people, it just went with people and went like, wow, what the hell is going on? And it took a lot of years for them to be able to iterate that service. So disruption is starting something from scratch. Innovation has to do with following certain rules and following certain strategy and methodologies that have worked for a lot of years, even if you don't realize it. Because people say that innovation is new, but to be honest with you, I think that it has always existed. We just branded it. So yeah.
Okay, so my last question is, it's important to balance the need for visually appealing design with functionality to ensure positive user experience that contributes to customer loyalty.
Yes. Would you go, let me just place an example. Okay. Would you go to a party wearing Crocs?
I will, but yeah, I'm weird.
Why not? Why not?
Yeah.
Because they're ugly.
Yeah.
They're crazy comfortable. Like I would wear them all day long wherever I go to, but the reality is that I will stop using them if they're ugly. And it has to do more, as I already told you, not with the principle of usability, but more with the principle of feasibility. I want this to be desirable. I want this to be, I want to have something new, something nice. And I think that gaining customer loyalty has to do with that. If you see, for example, brands, every single like clothing brands, every single season they have a new parade. They respond to people's needs. They respond to people's wants. So that's the way that they keep bringing them back. Because if not, you can buy it. I think it was Chanel who stated that a black dress would be used for any occasion. Yeah, she's right. But you have to adapt that black dress on what's going on around you. And I think services are much like that. So it can be useful, but if it's ugly, then people will be like, ugh. I'll show you. I think the easiest difference between that, like my favorite usability example is Google Sheet versus Excel. Excel is a machine that everyone can use for anything. Like I've seen, you can use it for data visualization. You can use it to build spreadsheets, create macros. It's a very robust piece of software. But the reality is that it's so ugly and so complicated to use that people rather use Google Sheets that can do half the things that Microsoft can do because it's simpler, it's easier, it's nicer, it gets stored easily, and you can share it very easily with whoever, right?
Yes, that's true.